Good morning, welcome back to Near Post Flick On. So it's official, Crystal Palace have been demoted to the Conference League. And I tell you what, if you're a Crystal Palace fan, I feel for you guys because it's an absolute travesty. It's absolutely disgusting what UEFA have done. They have demoted Crystal Palace to the Conference League. So initially, Crystal Palace were eligible and outright qualified for the Europa League, having won the FA Cup. Their first silverware ever, and you kind of feel that the position and the place was earned. So to have that stripped away from them is an absolute travesty. I can't believe what UEFA have done. I think Crystal Palace definitely deserve to be playing Europa League football, and of course they're good enough to be in that competition. Make no doubts about that. They are absolutely good enough to be in that competition. But however, when these rules are set in place, one has to try ultimately not to breach or break these rules. And the rules are in place. That's why it's governed, just so everything's in line. So unfortunately for Crystal Palace and their supporters, they have been demoted to the Conference League. UEFA have ruled that Crystal Palace cannot participate in the same competition as Lyon. And the reason for that is because a gentleman by the name of John Textor, who I believe is a member of both boards, owns shares in both Lyon and Crystal Palace. So effectively, it's a conflict of interest, and because of this conflict of interest, Crystal Palace they've been sacrificed. I would be gutted if I were the Palace players. I'd be gutted. Imagine that you've just won your first silverware. You're on a high. You're thinking to yourself, "Oh, next season we're going to be in the Europa League competition, for the first time." So there's going to be a lot of expectations and a lot of jubilation around that magnificent feat, and Palace would want to build on that. And again, you think of the financial um, ramifications of that as well. Palace will be losing money now because if they were in the Europa League, they'd be getting a lot of money. But now they're playing in a lesser competition of the Conference League. The money isn't going to be as much. However, I do feel it's a bit of an injustice, and I think Palace definitely deserve to be in that competition because it's not easy for a small club like Crystal Palace. Well, I'm saying they're a small club. You might disagree. I don't know, but for a small club like Crystal Palace to have earned that right to play in the Europa League, I think they deserve to represent themselves. They absolutely deserve it. But it just shows you, and it's a lesson learned. It's a lesson learned. You've got to read small prints. You've got to read the fine prints. The rules weren't made yesterday. These are rules that have been in place for donkey years, for centuries. So obviously, I think it may have been an oversight on John Texter's on his part for owning shares in both uh, clubs. But apparently, or allegedly, he's already sold the shares. So if he sold the shares, then that kind of alleviates that notion that there is a conflict of interest. But anyway, the ruling still stands. Crystal Palace will be playing in the Conference League next year. But at least, let's say, if we're going to be positive and if we're going to think positively, you could say, well, at least they are still in a European competition, because it could be worse. They could have said to them, no, you're not playing in anything. No matter whether you won the FA Cup or not, you're not playing in nothing because of this individual. But at least they are still in the Conference League. So that is something, I guess. That is something to look forward to. And again, on the plus side as well, the fact that it's the Conference League, it means, Palace have a great chance of winning it. I'm not saying that they weren't good enough to win the Europa League, because of course they were. Of course they were. But it would have been slightly more difficult to attain that feat. But however, the Conference League makes it all the more possible for them to add to that success of the FA Cup. So I think they've got a great chance. Just forget about the ruling. It's done. What's done is done. Forget about it. You're not in the Europa League anymore. Focus on the Conference League, and I'm sure it's a competition that Palace can win. And I know all the Eagle supporters will be behind them, and they will be supporting all of Crystal Palace. However, the only issue is that there's that issue with Eze. Will he go to Arsenal? That's the question, and I'm sure some Palace fans. I'm sure you're going to be sweating it. I'm sure you're going to be having some sleepless nights, because what you don't want to do is let go of some of your key players. Now, of course, they lost Elise to Bayern Munich last season and what have you. You don't really want to be selling your best players. You want to be able to kind of keep hold of them and kind of mold a team around your best players. Now, I'm not saying if Eze goes, then Crystal Palace are just gonna they're just gonna capitulate. I'm not saying that. I'm saying with Eze in the team, they have a better chance of greater success. And with Eze out of the team, well, it is what it is, isn't it? But for now, Crystal Palace demoted to the Conference League. Palace fans, don't be too disheartened. It's a competition that you can win, and I'm sure you probably will do. So let's keep focused. Let's keep positive. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.